Every single day, 90 million people walk into a Starbucks. 90 million. That's more than the entire population of Germany, ordering coffee every single day. For most of them, it's just a habit, a $6 latte on the way to work, something they don't even think about. They tap their phone, grab their cup, and walk out. But here's what almost nobody knows about that cup of coffee. The man who built this empire grew up with absolutely nothing. A tiny apartment in a Brooklyn housing project, a father who couldn't pay rent, a family that was one bad week away from completely falling apart. And before Howard Schultz built one of the most recognizable brands in human history, 217 investors told him his idea was stupid. 217 people, to his face. So how does a broke kid from the projects end up building a $100 billion empire that serves 90 million customers every single day? Well, the answer starts in a place most billionaires would never want to talk about. Howard Schultz was born in 1953 in Brooklyn, New York. Not the trendy Brooklyn you see on Instagram, the kind of Brooklyn where 150 families are crammed into one building and everyone knows exactly how much trouble their neighbors are in. The Schultz family lived in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment on the 7th floor of a government housing project called Bayview Houses. His dad worked whatever jobs he could find. Truck driver, factory worker, cab driver. His mum stretched every dollar as far as it could go. But the money was never enough. There was always stress, always tension, always the quiet fear that things could get worse. Then, one winter morning, when Howard was just 7 years old, they did. His father slipped at work and broke his ankle. No sick pay, no health insurance, no workers' compensation, nothing. The family's only source of income disappeared overnight, just like that. Howard watched his father lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling, unable to work, unable to provide. A good, hard-working, honest man, completely destroyed by a system that felt nothing for him. That image burned itself into Howard's memory, and it never left. Years later, Howard would say that everything he built, every decision he ever made at Starbucks was shaped by that moment, by a little boy watching his father fall apart on a couch in a Brooklyn housing project. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Howard threw himself into sports to escape the weight of growing up poor. He was talented enough to earn a football scholarship to Northern Michigan University, becoming the first person in his entire family to ever go to college. He graduated, moved back to New York, and started climbing the ladder. First a job at Xerox, then a vice president role at a Swedish housewares company. Not bad at all for a kid who grew up counting coins for dinner. But Howard always felt like something was missing, like he was meant for something bigger. He just didn't know what yet. Then, in 1981, something strange caught his attention at work. A tiny, unknown coffee shop in Seattle called Starbucks was placing massive orders for drip coffee machines. More than any department store, more than made any sense for a small shop. Howard was curious, so he flew to Seattle just to see what was going on. What he found floored him. Starbucks was nothing fancy. 11 employees, a few shelves of coffee beans, a small roasting room in the back. But the two founders who ran the place were completely, obsessively passionate about coffee in a way Howard had never experienced before. They talked about coffee like other people talked about art, like it was a religion. Howard walked out of that store and immediately called his wife. He wanted to quit his VP job and work there. She thought he had lost his mind. He did it anyway. In 1983, Starbucks sent Howard on a buying trip to Milan, Italy, and that trip changed everything. On every single street corner in Milan, there was a coffee bar. Not a cafe, a bar. People weren't grabbing coffee and sprinting out the door. They were standing around, laughing, chatting with the barista, who knew their name, their order, their kids' names. The coffee bar wasn't just a place to get caffeine, it was the heart of the neighborhood, a living room for the whole community. Milan alone had over 1,500 of these places. Howard stood on those streets and felt something electric run through him, because he realized something in that moment that would completely change his life. America had nothing like this, and he was going to build it. He flew back to Seattle buzzing with excitement and ran straight into his boss's office. He pitched the idea with everything he had. Transform Starbucks into Italian-style espresso bars. Stop selling just beans. Sell the experience. Sell the feeling of that Milan street corner. They said no. They were a coffee bean retailer. Simple as that. That's what they were, and that's what they wanted to stay. Howard pushed, he argued, he wouldn't drop it. Eventually, they let him test the concept in just one small corner of one Starbucks store in downtown Seattle. It was packed from the very first day. People lined up. They came back the next day, and the day after that. Howard was ecstatic. Surely now the owners would see it. Surely now they'd change their minds. They didn't. So in 1985, Howard made the most terrifying decision of his life. He quit Starbucks. He was going to build this thing himself, from scratch, with nothing. He wrote a business plan and named his new coffee bar company Il Giornale, Italian for the newspaper. Then he started hunting for investors. What followed was one of the most brutal periods of his entire life. 217 people said no. Some were polite about it. Others laughed at him. Americans will never pay a premium for coffee, they told him. Coffee is a commodity. This will never work. Some didn't even bother calling him back. Every single morning, Howard woke up, put on his suit, and walked into another rejection. His wife was pregnant. His savings were running out. The pressure was almost unbearable. But he refused to quit, because every time he felt like giving up, he thought about that apartment in Brooklyn. He thought about his father on that couch. He had promised himself he would never end up like that, and he wasn't going to stop now. Finally, after pitching more than 240 investors, he scraped together just enough money to open his first Il Giornale coffee bar in Seattle. The line went around the block on opening day. A second location opened, then a third in Vancouver. The concept was working exactly the way Howard had always known it would. And then, in 1987, fate handed him the opportunity he had been waiting for. The original founders of Starbucks decided they wanted to sell the company. Howard had 6 weeks to raise $4 million. 6 weeks. $4 million, starting from almost nothing. He did it. Howard bought Starbucks, merged it with Il Giornale, kept the Starbucks name, and became CEO at just 34 years old. Then he got to work turning every single store into the Italian coffee bar experience he had dreamed about since those streets in Milan. Lattes, cappuccinos, warm lighting, soft music, comfortable chairs where people actually wanted to stay for an hour. He called it the third place. Not home, not work, but somewhere in between. A place that belonged to everyone. America went absolutely crazy for it. Within 4 years, Starbucks exploded from 11 stores to over 100. In 1992, Howard took the company public. The IPO raised $271 million in a single day. By the time he first stepped down as CEO in 2000, there were 2,500 Starbucks locations in countries all over the world. Today, that number sits at over 35,000. But here's the part of this story that most people never hear. The part that actually matters most. At every single Starbucks location, every employee, including part-time workers, received full health insurance and stock options in the company. Howard made Starbucks the first major American company to ever offer that to part-time staff. Nobody asked him to do it. Wall Street certainly didn't want him to. It cost a fortune. But Howard didn't care, because he knew exactly why he was doing it. He had spent his whole life watching what happens to people like his father. Good, hard-working people who give everything they have and get nothing back when things go wrong. He had built one of the most powerful companies in the world, and he was going to make sure the people inside it were protected. The little boy from the Brooklyn housing project, the one whose father had no health insurance and no safety net, had grown up, and he made sure nobody who worked for him would ever have to go through what his family went through. 217 investors said his idea was stupid. 35,000 stores later, the whole world knows their coffee order by heart. Next time you grab that overpriced pumpkin spice latte, now you know exactly who made it possible.